Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Gretchen and today I'm going to be doing another review for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction Longlist, and today's pick is going to be Thunderclap, a memoir of art and life and sudden death by Laura Cumming. Now, I will be perfectly honest and say that when I picked up this book, I went into it completely blind. I knew that I was going to read it regardless, so I kind of didn't really take too much time to look into what it was about. I knew it was a memoir just based on the title. I assumed that it was going to be heavily dependent on art, but I really didn't know much more than that. And as I started to get into it, I quickly became very pleasantly surprised that it was based primarily on the artist Carol Fabricius, which that name might not mean a lot to many people, but if you have ever read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, you will know or may know that the painting, which is the book is based on or focuses on, this little guy here, The Goldfinch, was painted by Carol Fabricius. And I understand that The Goldfinch is one of those books that is very polarizing. Some people love it, some people think it's trash. I adore this book, and when I was reading it, I remember falling in love with that little guy in that painting. I absolutely love it. He stole my heart, and when I was reading it, I remember several times like going and looking this painting up and just admiring it, and I just absolutely adore it. So when I started to learn that this book was about the artist that painted this, I immediately became more and more intrigued with the story. And one of the things that really took me by surprise was that although I was kind of enthralled by the painting, most of my research was strictly on the painting itself and not necessarily on the artist. And what I didn't know was how young Carol Fabricius was when he died, and also how tragic of circumstances his death was. And this book, Thunderclap, brought all of that to light, and it was a story that I had no idea had ever happened. So basically the title, Thunderclap, refers to an event that happened back in 1654, and it was basically a gunpowder house or a gunpowder storage house in the city of Delft in the Netherlands exploded, and in its wake it destroyed a good part of the town, and it also killed several people, including eventually Carol Fabricius. And I say eventually because he did survive the initial explosion, but he did end up succumbing to his injuries a little bit later on after they had found him in the wreckage. So I was really shocked to hear that that was the fate of the artist, and also learning more about the area and about that Dutch Renaissance where all of these famous Dutch painters came up through the ranks and made a name for themselves in that time. So obviously, I think when most people think of Dutch artists, they think of a Rembrandt and they think of Vermeer, but I have since reading Thunderclap started looking more and more into the art of Carol Fabricius, and I find it fascinating and beautiful, and learning about his life and how relatively unknown he was as an artist is almost heartbreaking, considering, you know, the pieces of his that we still have left truly are absolutely beautiful. And I was really thankful to Laura Cumming for bringing this story to my attention. We learned very much about Carol Fabricius's life in this book, but it was also part history where we learned about his life and the golden age of these Dutch painters, but it was also part memoir as well. So Laura Cumming is an art writer and critic, and she not only told the history of Carol Fabricius, but she also interwove her story and her memoir into this book as well. So we learn about her father, who was an artist. We learn about her relationship with him and how she developed her love for art, and how her father instilled that in her and she carried it on throughout the rest of her life. And one thing that was really, I guess, special for this, about this book for me, is when we talk about the title. So it's a memoir of art and life and sudden loss. And when you think about it, so far what I've told you about Fabricius's story is that he was very young when he died. I think he was only like 28 or something like that. So very young, but it was sudden. Obviously an explosion, an accident. His life was taken very, very quickly. But Laura Cumming also talks about different kinds of losses throughout her life as well. And obviously we talk about her father, and her father is an artist, and he eventually got to the point where he lost his sight. But we also learn about other parts of her life in which things were lost suddenly. There's a section of the story where she focuses on her daughter and her daughter's sudden color blindness that happened one day when she was taking a photo, and she took a photo of the sun, and the refraction of the sun through the camera lens ended up doing some type of damage to her eyes, where she immediately became colorblind all of the sudden. So it's not just a story about loss in the sense of death, but also a loss of things that are once a part of us, but all of the sudden are gone. And I think that she did a really great job of interweaving all of these different components into her story. So although it was touted as a memoir, it was very much an historical based book that was sprinkled with memoir, but it was also the story about other people in her life as well. So I think that this was a very good book. It's a book that I think people that appreciate art or enjoy art are going to be more drawn to. I'm not saying that you have to like art to appreciate the book, but you're definitely going to get more out of it. The book was actually beautiful as well, because anytime there was a piece of art that was discussed, there was a full color picture of it for you to follow along with. And if I have one gripe about a lot of books that are out there that mention art and visual things, is when you have to take the time to investigate it yourself. You have to go look it up to understand what they're talking about. But this book was not that. It was not the case with this book. All of the pictures were there. The pictures were all in color so that you could see exactly what the author was speaking of. And it was a really beautiful book. It was constructed well. The writing was beautiful. I eventually settled on a 4 for this book, only because I think that although I appreciated this book and I enjoyed it because of my personal connection and my love of that specific painting by Carol Fabricius. I think that if you don't have that specific personal connection to it, you're probably not going to get as much out of this book as I did, but I ended up settling on a 4, and I think that if any of it is interesting to you, especially if you were a fan of the goldfinch and this little guy, I think that it would be a book worth reading. I definitely took a lot away from it. It wasn't just a straightforward memoir. Like I said, it also was kind of that hybrid where we had memoir, we had history. So I was learning about Laura Cumming as a person, and I was learning her story, but I was also getting all of this history on Dutch art, and I absolutely loved it. So if that sounds like something that would be interesting to you, I definitely recommend picking it up. And I think this is my 6th book down, or my 6th review for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction. I have finished some other ones, and those reviews will be getting out soon, but we're still going really well with this long list. I am really surprised that we have all of these different kinds of nonfiction that I am meshing with. I used to think that I was only a memoir reader when it came to nonfiction, but I am finding myself just being intrigued by all of these different subgenres of nonfiction. So I am really enjoying myself with this long list. So hoping that it still continues that way for the last few books that I have to read, but I guess we'll see. And until we read again, bye.